I'll never forget the look on Karen's face when the cuffs finally clicked around her wrists, wide-eyed, mouth agape, stunned into silence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. It was a flawless Sunday morning. The sky was clear. The birds were chirping, and I had just finished detailing my pride and joy, a cherry-red Corvette Stingray that gleamed like liquid fire under the sun. I'd spent 3 solid hours waxing every curve and crease, and seeing it sparkle in my driveway was worth every bead of sweat. That's when she appeared. Karen Westfield, HOA president, community menace, arms folded tightly across her chest, that infamous scowl locked on her face like it had been carved there. "Excuse me," she barked, stomping across the street and planting herself squarely between me and my car like a crossing guard on a power trip. "I need the keys to that vehicle." Immediately, I blinked. Surely I misheard. "Karen, what are you talking about?" "That Corvette," she said, her voice sharp with authority she thought she possessed. "It belonged to my brother. I don't know how you got it, but if you don't hand over the keys right now, I'm calling the police." She extended her hand expectantly, as if I'd just hand over my car because she said so. I didn't move. I didn't have to. Within the hour, the police would show up, but not for me. See, I'd only been living in Oakwood Estates for about 3 months. After years of grinding and saving, I had finally bought my dream home in what was supposed to be a quiet, upscale neighborhood. And the Corvette? That was a promise I made to my teenage self, back when I used to drool over car magazines and daydream about the day I'd park one in my own driveway. What I hadn't expected was that my car would stir up a personal vendetta from the local HOA president. From the moment I moved in, Karen seemed to take offense at the Corvette's existence. First, it was the passive-aggressive letters, reminders about neighborhood aesthetic standards. Then came the not-so-passive comments. "That color's a bit bold, don't you think?" she'd say with a smile that stopped at her teeth. "Most residents here prefer more understated vehicles." I'd just smile back and quietly wonder how many revs it'd take to rattle her shutters without breaking the noise ordinance. But it didn't stop there. Soon, neon-colored violation slips began appearing on my windshield. Vehicle in violation of aesthetic guidelines, excessively flashy appearance, disruptive to neighborhood harmony. I dug into the HOA bylaws. Nothing about paint color, nothing about car models, just rules about where to park and making sure vehicles were maintained. So, at the next HOA meeting, I brought it up. Karen waved me off like I was interrupting a royal decree. "The board," she said coolly, "reserves the right to interpret guidelines in the best interest of community welfare. Translation, she makes the rules. Things really hit a new gear when I upgraded the exhaust. Nothing outrageous, just a deeper growl, carefully chosen to stay within legal decibel limits. But Karen, she noticed. The very next morning, I spotted her out there with her phone, snapping photos of my Corvette like she was building a case file. When she caught me watching from the window, she stormed up to my door and laid into bell like it owed her money. "That exhaust is now in violation of noise ordinances," she snapped the moment I opened the door. "If you don't remove it within 48 hours, I'll have the car towed at your expense." Her eyes gleamed with power, like she'd just drawn blood. But I stayed calm. "Karen, I said evenly, the exhaust is legal. I checked the city's noise limits before I installed it." Her lips curled. "This isn't about city regulations," she hissed. "This is about HOA rules. And as president, I decide what's a violation." That was the moment I knew this was no longer just about a car. I nodded, thanked her for her concern, and closed the door. That night, I installed a security camera pointed straight at my driveway, just in case. Good call. Over the next 2 weeks, Karen went into overdrive. She sent out a neighborhood-wide email complaining about residents undermining community tranquility with ostentatious vehicles. She even called an emergency HOA meeting to propose new vehicular aesthetic standards, which just so happened to target cars like mine. Fortunately, not everyone in the neighborhood was buying what she was selling. When the other board members didn't buy into her nonsense, Karen resorted to more direct and ridiculous tactics. One Saturday morning, I glanced out the window and caught her crouched near my Corvette, tape measure in hand, carefully checking the distance from my rear tire to the curb. Apparently, she was hoping to catch me on some obscure parking violation. When she noticed me watching, she looked up and smiled like she was performing a public service. Just doing my duty as HOA president. Someone has to maintain standard around here. Right, because nothing screams community safety like measuring curbs with military precision. The very next day, I found a notice taped to my front door, accusing my car of leaking fluids and damaging the driveway. It was a complete fabrication, pure fantasy. I snapped photos of the spotless concrete under the car and emailed them to the HOA. CCNG Karen, of course. No response. But all of that was just build-up. Then came that Sunday, the day she crossed the line. I was outside enjoying the morning, buffing a final bit of wax on the Corvette's hood. The sun was shining. The neighborhood was calm. A few neighbors were out walking their dogs or fetching the paper. And then, like a storm cloud on heels, Karen charged across the street. She marched right up and planted herself between me and my car again, arms folded, chin high, her body language screaming confrontation. "I've had enough of this charade," she said loudly, clearly performing for the growing audience. "That is my brother's Corvette, and I want the keys. Right now." Her voice shook with emotion, but there was something so staged about the way she said it that it immediately set off alarm bells in my head. I stared at her. "Karen, what are you even talking about? I bought this car brand new, 3 years ago." "Don't lie to me," she snapped, her voice rising. "This is Robert's car. Same color, same model. He died last month, and his car went missing. That license plate frame, he had the exact one. You stole it, and I'm going to prove it." By now, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered at a respectful distance, phones out and quietly recording. I could feel every camera lens on me. I took a breath, keeping my voice calm. "Karen, I'm sorry for your loss, but this is my car. I have all the documentation to prove it." I reached into my pocket for my phone, but before I could even unlock it, she lunged forward and tried to snatch my keys. "Give me those keys," she yelled, her face contorted with fury. "That car belongs to my family." I stepped back, keeping the keys out of reach. That only made her more hysterical. "You're a thief, a common criminal who moved into our neighborhood thinking no one would notice." "That's enough," I said firmly. "I'm calling the police. This has gone too far." Her expression twisted into something smug. "I already did," she said triumphantly. "I called 911 before I came over. I reported a grand theft auto in progress. They'll be here any minute to arrest you and impound my car." And right on cue, the sound of sirens echoed down the street. 2 patrol cars pulled up moments later, lights flashing. 3 officers stepped out, hands resting casually on their belts, clearly unsure what kind of mess they were walking into. Karen rushed toward them, playing the part of the grieving sister. "That's him," she cried, pointing at me. "That's the man who stole my brother's Corvette. I have the spare key and all the paperwork at home. He must have hotwired it. Please, just check the VIN number." The lead officer, a calm, composed woman, held up her hands and asked us to remain separated. "Sir, can you provide proof of ownership of the vehicle?" she asked me. "Absolutely," I said, already pulling out my phone. I opened my digital glove box app and showed her photos of the title, registration, insurance, and the original purchase agreement, all clearly listing my name. "I also have the physical copies inside if you'd like to see those." She glanced over the digital files, then asked me to retrieve the originals. I did, bringing out a manila folder stuffed with receipts, documents, and a dealership contract with my name and purchase date. While I handed those over, Karen grew more and more agitated. "Those documents are forged," she shrieked. "He probably photoshopped his name over my brother's paperwork. Just check the VIN number. It'll match my brother's car. I know it will." The officers did just that. They ran the VIN through their database, and, unsurprisingly, it matched my name and registration perfectly. The car was mine, and had been legally registered to me for the past 3 years. The officer turned to Karen. "Ma'am, Do you have any documentation showing your brother owned this vehicle? Her smug expression cracked, just for a second. Then she straightened up and said, "Not on me, but if you come to my house, I can show you photographs. My brother had a car just like that. Same make, same color, same everything." One officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "Ma'am," he said gently, "even if your brother did own a similar Corvette, that doesn't mean this particular vehicle ever belonged to him." The officer explained calmly, "Every piece of documentation confirms that this gentleman is the rightful owner." Karen's face turned a furious shade of red. "You're not listening to me," she shrieked. "He faked the paperwork somehow. That is my brother's car, and I want him arrested for theft." Then, completely losing what was left of her composure, she lunged at me again, this time going for the pocket where I had tucked away my keys. "Give me those keys right now," she screamed. The officers jumped into action. One grabbed her arm and pulled her back, while the lead officer spoke sharply. "Ma'am, you need to calm down." But Karen was far past reasoning. "You're all incompetent," she yelled, flailing against the officer's grip. "That's Robert's car. I'm the president of this HOA, and I demand you do your job." With a sudden twist, she broke free for a second and managed to tear the edge of my pocket before being tackled and restrained. That was it. The officers moved decisively, pinning her arms and snapping the handcuffs on. "Karen Westfield, you're under arrest for filing a false police report, attempted theft, and assault," the lead officer said coolly as she began reading Karen her rights. The look on Karen's face was something I'll never forget. Wide eyes, mouth agape, as if the idea that she could be the one getting arrested had never once crossed her mind. "This is outrageous," she sputtered, as they walked her to the patrol car. "Do you know who I am? I'm the president of Oakwood Estates HOA. You can't arrest me for protecting what's mine." But they could, and they did. Later that evening, the neighborhood buzzed with updates. I learned from a few well-placed sources that Karen had been officially charged with 3 counts: filing a false report, attempted theft, and assault. The evidence against her was airtight, thanks to multiple eyewitnesses and more than one smartphone video capturing her attempt to snatch my keys. And the cherry on top, Karen didn't even have a brother named Robert. That entire sob story, a complete fabrication. When that little detail came to light, the judge set her bail at $25,000 and issued a restraining order. She was now legally barred from coming within 100 feet of me or my property. The fallout came fast and hard. Within 48 hours, the HOA board held an emergency vote and unanimously removed her as president. Her employer, a well-known local real estate agency, suspended her indefinitely without pay, pending the outcome of her case. Apparently, screaming "That's my Corvette" while being hauled into a police cruiser didn't fit their ethical image. And when the story hit the evening news, complete with video clips and dramatic narration, Karen's professional reputation imploded almost overnight. The final blow came 3 months later at her sentencing hearing. She arrived with a high-priced attorney who claimed she'd suffered a temporary emotional break brought on by grief. But the judge wasn't buying it. Karen was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 2 years of probation, and a $5,000 fine, plus court costs. As the bailiff escorted her out of the courtroom, her face wore the same stunned expression I'd seen on my driveway that morning. Only now it was tinged with something new, the dawning realization that, at long last, her actions had consequences.